Now, imagine if you were told that there is a secret society with a time machine. Whenever Earth is threatened with mass extinction or destruction, they use the time machine to make Earth travel back in time, and in new reality they stop the Earth before that happens. But every time travel have its own consequences. Welcome to my channel, and let's start today's story. The story starts as a couple wakes up on the morning of July 1st, marking a momentous day for George. He has developed an app with the unique ability to predict stock market fluctuations accurately. Eager to secure investment for his venture, George heads to the bank where the reliability of his app convinces them to invest. Overjoyed, George celebrates with Sarah that night. Amid their happiness, news of a spreading virus named MERS-22 appears on the TV, initially overlooked by everyone. As months pass, Sarah becomes pregnant, prompting her decision to marry George. Simultaneously, George's app gains fame as it performs exceptionally well. However, as December approaches, the world undergoes a drastic transformation. The once ignored virus now wreaks havoc globally, claiming millions of lives daily, overwhelming hospitals, and causing shortages of essential supplies. When George, accompanied by Sarah, visits the hospital, he observes a sudden, ominous change in his surroundings. In an instant, everything turns blank. Upon reopening his eyes, he discovers that it is July 1st again, 6 months in the past. George is astonished to find himself back in time, and what's even more peculiar is that only he retains the memories of events up to December. As George grapples with this bewildering situation, he realizes that Sarah has no recollection of the events, instilling fear in him. On the day he was supposed to secure a loan from the bank, he discovers that the manager has no memory of their previous interactions. The weird behavior of George makes the manager reject his loan. George stands alone in possessing the knowledge of the entire future timeline. This strange situation terrifies him. George, now troubled and confused, goes home and warns Sarah that MERS-22 virus is going to spread in the future, causing global devastation. However, Sarah does not believe him, and from here, time begins to pass in a way that brings further distress to both George and Sarah. As days go by, Sarah becomes increasingly distressed by George's actions, and George, without his app and with poor financial conditions, is abandoned by Sarah for these reasons. This means that in this new timeline, their marriage never happened, and George didn't become famous. However, George had grown tired of explaining to everyone that he had already lived through this future. In the midst of this, he encounters a mysterious woman named Archie who believes his story. She gives George a card with an address and informs him that if he undergo time travel again, George should meet her at this address. Slowly and steadily months pass again. This time, the same virus spreads again and people are dying. However, Sarah is not with George this time, and he discovers that Sarah is now dating her coworker, Carlos. But once again, as soon as December arrives, the entire Earth undergoes time travel. When George wakes up on July 1st, he is overjoyed to find Sarah again. Quickly reaching the specified address, he meets with Archie, who begins to explain the recurring time travel phenomenon. Archie tells George that Earth has to undergo time travel repeatedly to save it from various threats. However, no one else remembers this, and George is among the 0.0000001% of people who have mutated genes. This means that whenever Earth undergoes time travel, George retains memories of the previous timeline. Therefore, only George remembered that they had gone back in time, and others didn't remember anything. And those without mutated genes take a serum to make this happen, like Archie herself. She says that George had already gone through 20 time jumps but only remembers last 2 jumps because he has mutated recently. Archie explains further that she is a member of a secret organization called the Lazarus Project. This organization possesses a time machine and selects only a few chosen individuals who is responsible of time traveling the Earth. Whenever the world is on the brink of a catastrophic event, they send the entire Earth back to a time 6 months prior. Archie reveals that the organization has saved the Earth numerous times, preventing nuclear wars caused by USA-Russia, stopping World War III because of Pakistan-India, stopping new type of smallpox to spread from a lab, and now for this time, preventing the spread of a new virus, MERS-22. Only available checkpoints are January 1st and July 1st. They can't time travel on random days, only on these specific days, and only the mutated individuals, like George, retain memories of the time travel. Archie brings George to her main headquarters, where he meets the team led by Wes. Besides Archie, there's Greta, Blake, Eric, and Shiv. All of them are from special forces like MI5. Except for Shiv, he had known about time travel since birth. He was born with mutant gene, and now the team is working together to create an antidote for the new virus. However, there is another significant threat. A nuclear bomb big boy has been stolen from Iran, and they need to find it to prevent a blast. After learning all this, George is offered the opportunity to join the organization and he agrees. They have a tradition before saving world, they always have a cocktail. George joins the entire team to work together. They starts his training. As George is an app developer, he does work related to that. In the midst of this, he found out that the person who stole the nuclear bomb from Iran is not just anyone but an agent named Denis Rebrov. Denis used to work for Lazarus Project before, meaning he already knew about time travel. This makes him even more dangerous. The team collaborates to locate Denis, and during this time, George has a chance encounter with Carlos at a party. After Carlos' request, George suggests investing in a company which about to go bankrupt. Next day, Carlos starts threatening Sarah because George's advice led to him losing all his money. Carlos pushes Sarah and was about to hit by truck, but George saves her. The next day, they discovers that the location of Denis and the bomb has been found. They head to Paris. The team splits, with George and Eric stay out monitoring them from outside. Archie, along with the rest of the team, raids Denis's location. However, Denis proves to be cunning, systematically taking down each team member, including Archie. Meanwhile, George and Eric focus on chasing Denis, who attempts to escape on a bike. After intense chase, they finally catch up, causing Denis to crash. Denis then shoots down Eric. Meanwhile, the police arrive at the scene. Trapped, Denis triggers the nuclear bomb, causing casualties in the millions. As the mission fails, everything resets to July 1st. George is relieved that he is still alive. While George leaves for his office after letting Sarah go, Archie calls to inform him that they have a new lead on Denis. This time, they can act earlier. Carlos starts threatening Sarah because George's advice led to him losing all his money, and amidst this argument, Sarah meets with an accident involving a truck, severely injuring her. This time George couldn't save her. Quickly, George rushes her to the hospital where the doctors inform him that Sarah is in a coma. They are uncertain about when she will wake up or if she will survive. George asks Archie to reset time again to prevent Sarah's accident from happening. However, Archie reveals a surprising fact: their organization avoids conducting time travel for personal reasons. Because each time when we go back in time, it created multiple different versions of timeline. For example, if someone is born in a timeline might not be born in another timeline. In 1 week, millions of babies are born, but if turned back time, millions of different babies might be born or not born at all. Also, if a man may be married to someone in one timeline might not be in another. Also, if someone died in one timeline in another it didn't. It is considered a significant risk for the entire world, and they only resort to time travel when the world is on the brink of destruction. In summer year 2018, when Archie, along with her boyfriend Ross, was on a mission to prevent a war between Russia and Kyrgyzstan, which starts World War III. Despite multiple time travels, the conflict kept escalating. They'd gone back in time dozens of times, but they couldn't stop the destruction. In one of timeline, Archie died, and in that timeline was best outcome to stop war. But Ross somehow turned back in time to save Archie. After multiple dozens of attempts, in the end, when there was no way out, then Ross tricked Archie and sacrificed himself to eliminate the politician who was about to initiate the war. Despite Archie's repeated requests to Wes, she never initiated a time reset after that because the World War was already stoked. At same time, it is shown at summer 2018 multiple versions of events simultaneously occurring with George while Archie and Ross were resetting time in Russia multiple times. It was the timeline when George was about to meet Sarah. In many timelines he couldn't meet Sarah. Then at last in the final timeline in which war was stoked, they finally met in that version. If the timeline in which he couldn't meet Sarah was adjusted, his life would have completely different. Meanwhile, Denis has finally been captured by the agents and they have also found the antidote for the virus. This means there won't be a time reset. Shiv explains to George that their organization will never initiate a time reset due to personal reasons. However, George confronts Denis and asks why. As an agent of the same organization, he wants to destroy the world. Denis says that repeatedly altering reality through time travel is not the right course of action. They must not play God. He believes that they are tampering with nature, and he wishes for the organization to permanently cease to exist, avoiding any future instances of time travel. Meanwhile, George receives a call from the hospital and rushes there. He discovers that Sarah has passed away. Now, George goes alone to Denis and asks him to help reset time. George is now prepared for this, and he requests Denis to reveal information about his bomb detonator. The plan is for George to blast the bomb, bringing destruction to the world, so Wes would be compelled to perform a time reset. With trust in Denis, he discloses the location of the detonator, ensuring that if a time reset happens, Denis won't be caught this time. The other team members go to their mission to find Fat Boy nuclear weapon, leaving George behind. George goes to the location and there he meets Janet. Janet have to make a detonator for him. Initially she refuses, then she accepts his request. Janet tells him all about the story. Dennis used to work in the same organization with his wife Janet. In the year 2017, when Janet became pregnant, Shiv and the other agents were on a mission to prevent the use of a biochemical weapon. If not stopped, it would trigger a chain reaction leading to the onset of the Third World War. Initially, Shiv kills an agent, thinking that the chemical attack would not happen. However, soon after, Janet gives birth to a baby boy. Both Janet and Dennis were happy, but their joy is short-lived. Shiv informs Dennis that something has gone wrong and the man he killed was just a pawn. There is someone else capable of launching the biochemical attack, and if that happens, they will have to initiate a time reset, resulting in Dennis and Janet losing their baby. Initially, no news comes, but as the checkpoint approaches with only 2 days left for the time reset, Dennis discovers that the biochemical blast has occurred. Shiv and Dennis head to headquarters, where they observe the geopolitical situation. Due to this attack, 2 countries are now on the brink of war with each other. And if this happens, other countries will also be involved, and then everything will end. Now, Janet tells Wes for her baby that the war won't spread so much, so they shouldn't perform a time reset. However, Wes doesn't listen and insists that they must perform a time reset to prevent the biochemical attack. Upon hearing this, Janet starts crying because the time reset would mean losing her baby from reality. They were just hours away from the checkpoint. If they passed the checkpoint, their baby would be saved. So, she pleads with Wes not to do it for the sake of her baby. However, Wes's rules were clear. They would only save the world from ending. From here, another time reset occurs where Janet finds herself in the past when she wasn't pregnant. The bond between Janet and Dennis had completely shattered by now. Janet goes through the pain of being pregnant again to save the same child, but this time it's a girl. This means that her son will never come back. It's like the son is dead. This time mission was successfully completed. When the checkpoint is reached again, her delivery hadn't happened yet. In other words, she won't lose this child. However, by now, it was the year 2018 when Archie and Ross were trying to stop another World War III together. Yes, the same mission in which they had performed countless time resets whenever they failed in the mission. Janet, again, finds herself pregnant each time and has to give birth to her own daughter repeatedly. Imagine the condition Janet must be in, having to give birth to her own daughter again and again every time after the time reset. This happened not just once but multiple times. It was like never-ending time resets. Now, think about what Janet might have gone through, the pain and suffering, having to give birth to her own daughter repeatedly after every time reset. Meanwhile, Janet and Dennis discover that their daughter became mutated, meaning that her daughter also remembers every pregnancy due to time resets. Not just once but many times, Janet had to experience giving birth to her daughter after every time reset. Finally, when Ross sacrifices himself to complete the mission, Dennis and Janet gave birth to their daughter. Then Dennis decided that he would permanently stop the time resets and eliminate this organization regardless of what happens to the Earth. He says we must not play God, all will die when they are meant to. Dennis went to Wes and told her that he wanted to see the time machine that caused the time reset on Earth. He plans to destroy it. Wes explains him earlier that she couldn't show him the time machine. Afterwards, Dennis shoots Wes's secretary in an attempt to force her to reveal the location of the time machine. However, at that moment, Shiv intervenes and stops him. Following this, Dennis had to escape from there, and he told Janet to do the same. Janet, who had already realized that Dennis wasn't doing anything wrong, was experiencing a lot due to the repeated time travels by Dennis and his wife. Then next day, we see the detonator is ready. We open in 1981 with baby Shiv in his crib. His mother leaves his room and returns to find Shiv on the floor. Not only that, but now he can walk and talk. He's aging at a remarkable rate. Shiv's mom calls her doctor to explain what she's witnessed. Is there something amiss with her son? Of course, we know he boasts the ability to detect time jumps. While George inexplicably acquired it decades later, Shiv has always had this gift. Then we move through the next several years with Shiv tracking said time jumps and what causes them. He figures out that July 1st is the checkpoint. In 1994, teenage Shiv Shobit Payasaw scribbles his lingering questions in a notebook. Is he special? Does anyone else know about the jumps? Perhaps he can put this ability to good use. Shiv visits his uncle's convenience store. He notes the racist graffiti emblazoned on the storefront, "No thanks to bigoted assholes." Shiv tries to take a candy bar from his uncle, joking the latter should put it on his tab. His uncle reveals he can't afford to give away free items anymore. Shiv needs a job to pay for that. Before departing the store, Shiv reassures his cousin Dinesh that his family will triumph over their financial troubles. The store will survive this temporary rockiness. How does Shiv know? He just does. Next, Shiv gets the idea to bet on racehorses to make money. He has a distinct advantage over everyone else, to be sure. As expected, he accumulates a lot of cash from winning his bets. He plans to give it to his uncle to keep the store afloat but becomes distracted by video game stuff. Thus, he blows his money on games, shoes, and clothes. Later, he decides to bestow what little funds he has left to his uncle. Unfortunately, he arrives at the store to find it ablaze. Shiv's father embraces him tearfully. It appears his uncle and cousin didn't survive either. Thankfully, July 1st arrives and the Lazarus Project rolls back the clock after saving the world again. Shiv excitedly embraces Dinesh. We fast forward to September 3rd when Shiv's uncle's store went up in flames in the other timeline. Shiv enters the establishment to find Dinesh pouring gasoline on the floor. His plan? Burn down the building and collect the insurance money. However, Shiv reminds him they're standing in a store with abundant paper and alcohol. They'll incinerate instantly. Shiv calls the police, who arrest Dinesh. Shiv arrives home wherein Wes awaits him. She's there to recruit him for the Lazarus Project. Now we're in the present. Shiv interrogates Dennis regarding what the Lost Glories maps found during their mission meant. The map may help them to find location of nuclear weapon. Dennis doesn't give an inch. Dennis's face is a bruised mess. In headquarters, Ryan shows Wes, Shiv, Archie, Greta, the Dane, Blake, and George various map configurations in a bid to assess a location. Archie surmises it's a code. George confronts Shiv in the bathroom about Dennis's facial injuries. He accuses Shiv of going too far with his interrogations. Naturally, Shiv wonders why George is visiting Dennis of his own volition. Archie asks George to accompany her for drinks at the pub. He's secretly attempting to crack the code regarding the Lost Glories maps. Initially, he declines her offer, but she pulls the superior card. While at the pub, George asks Archie about interrogating Dennis. He believes the Lazarus Project's methods are too cruel. They don't quite align with their morally sound cause. Archie asserts they must do what they can to save the planet. Plus, Dennis is a wanted terrorist. She urges George to hold fast to that strong moral compass as he continues to work for Lazarus Project. Then she storms out. Later, George discovers what the maps mean. They spell out an IP address in Romania. He chats with Sarah's dad about funeral arrangements, but George doesn't want to dig into that. He plans to bring her back anyway. George uses Sarah's credit card, which hasn't been cancelled yet, to buy his plane ticket to Bucharest. Next, George calls Archie to inform her he's not feeling well and must take a few sick days. Shiv answers her phone. Naturally, he grows suspicious. He asks Ryan to hack George's bank statements. He delves into George's work concerning decoding the maps and what the latter discovered. Then he orders Ryan to dig into Sarah's banking stuff. He finds the Bucharest plane ticket purchase. George boards his plane and lands in Romania. Meanwhile, Ryan assists Shiv with tailing George. George embarks on a train trip to the IP address location with Shiv hot on his heels. Ryan texts Shiv to inform him that George is in the dining car. However, George catches onto Shiv following him and surprises his pursuer. He knocks Shiv unconscious and steals his gun. Then George utilizes a fire extinguisher to smash open a window, clamber out of said window, and make a run for it across a field. After Shiv wakes, he pursues George on foot. George runs through a nearby village, crashing into people's homes and climbing through windows. Shiv isn't far behind him. George falls out of a window and lands on his back, which knocks the wind out of him. Once he regains his bearings, George steals a motorbike and flees. Following suit, Shiv swipes a car to give chase. Well, except George is on a motorbike. He causes Shiv to crash into some rubble. Both men emerge from the wreckage, guns raised and ready to rumble. Shiv is fully prepared to bring George back to England, kicking and screaming, so he can pay for his crime. Suddenly, George shoots Shiv in the stomach. He vows to blow up the world to reset the clock, reviving Sarah and Shiv in turn. Shiv promises to hunt George down when that happens. Then, George shoots Shiv in the head. Later, Ryan texts Shiv's phone and asks about the next steps. George responds as Shiv, asking Ryan for a favor that must remain off the books. We see Ryan visit Dennis to deliver a message from George. Big plans are afoot. Dennis turns around and cups his ear with his hand as if to say, "Can you come closer?" "I missed that." Ryan steps forward hesitantly. The guard arrives with food for Dennis. He finds Dennis with his arms encircling Ryan's neck. Dennis snaps it, killing the poor young man. The guard sets off the alarm. After Dennis snaps Ryan's neck, he stands up with his hands out. Meanwhile, George stuffs Shiv's body into the trunk of the car. George drives toward his destination as lightning lights up the sky. These were 4 episodes of the series. If you enjoyed my video, don't forget to like, subscribe if you want next part.